Then they had me lay on my stomach, and then they pushed my heel to my butt till they heard a pop. And that was the lesions breaking inside of my knee. And it was just as painful as the original injury.
I bet. God, why am I having to deal with all this suffering?
Right.
It really just comes down to obedience.
Obedience and the word.
Once you label somebody, now you're in this fixed mindset.
Right.
Maybe that's true. Maybe they can't change. But that's not productive.
Right.
The productive path is to think that they can change.
I'm just going berserk because he's in so much pain. And your guys here that were part of this trip from your church ministered to me for the last 2 hours. They prayed for me, they encouraged me, and they kept me going.
This metal rod putting this on.
He's going to take a metal rod to heaven with him.
Right.
I've got 2 artificial knees I'm taking with me.
Do you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. You had both replaced?
Yeah, I played soccer for 20 years and blew them out. I've had 7 procedures on my left leg and left knee and 5 on my right knee.
So how many ligament repairs before you had them?
Well, I had ACLs done on both knees.
Yeah.
Okay, a year and a half after each other. I went back and played again and blew out the other one. And then I had a couple of cartilage cleanups. I was playing with knee braces, cartilage cleanup. And then finally, after the 4th knee surgery overall, I said, no mas, no more. And like that boxer, he said, no mas.
The female one?
No. I'm talking about before you were born, probably. He was fighting. Who was he fighting? He was in some heavyweight title.
That's what the female one said.
Yeah. Oh, she said no mas? Did she really? The Italian
she said
lady?
no more.
Yeah.
But isn't that how you say that in Italian?
Could be. Well, this was a Hispanic boxer fighting, I think, Sugar Ray Leonard or somebody like that, and he just stopped in the middle of the fight and said no mas.
Wow.
He didn't speak English. He just said no mas. That became kind of a meme, I guess you could say.
I'm so interested about that soccer. So what age did you stop playing?
36.
Wow.
So soccer wasn't for little kids in Omaha growing up. They didn't have soccer until a bunch of Europeans started gathering up high school kids and getting them to play on teams and stuff. And so I wasn't really, I went to a huge high school, so I really wasn't good at football or baseball or track or something compared to how many athletes were in that school. But not many kids were playing soccer. And that was something that I just the way I'm built, I flourished at. And it became a varsity sport the year after I graduated. And then I played soccer at the University of Nebraska, and it was a club status. And I tried to get it to be a varsity sport, but Title IX came into the picture. So they had to beef up women's sports. And so it has stayed as a club status for men. So for all my athletic prowess, I never got a letter. You want to give me a letter?
Roland, go make one. And then let's present it at the end of the show. I'm kidding. We're kidding. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I still play basketball.
Oh, do you?
I had an ACL reconstruction when I was 19.
Did you now?
Mm-hmm. ACL plus I stretched out the LCL and I completely ripped the meniscus. The meniscus.
Oh, the meniscus.
Yeah. So I had part of that removed. So now I'm able to continue to play by the grace of God. But there's a program called Knees Over Toes I found on YouTube, and I've been doing it, and it's allowed me to play. It's basically just strengthening the muscle that supports the joint in a deeper way, not just stopping, for example, at your knees. When you do a squat, you go heels to butt.
Wow, I would love to go heels to butt. I can't do that anymore.
How's it now though with the bionic knees?
The bionic knees, you can't really kneel on them very easily without a little pain. And you really have to work your range of motion, and it takes a lot of therapy to do that. Probably about 6 months. Funny, it's not nearly the therapy when I was 26 and I blew them out. Okay, I mean I had a full leg cast from my hip to my toe. This is in the early days of this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And my leg was frozen like that, After 6 weeks, they took the cast off, and it was about as big around as my arm.
Yeah, I remember.
And so they exercised it, on a Cybex machine back and forth until I got the full range. Then they had me lay on my stomach, and then they pushed my heel to my butt until they heard a pop. And that was the lesions breaking inside of my knee. And it was just as painful as the original injury.
I bet. What year was this?
This is 1986, maybe.
This is for the artificial knee?
No.
This is for the repair.
No. Yes, this is for the ACL. The ACL. And then when I got to do to the point, I went through stem cell treatment. That bought me about 5 years. And then it really did. I mean, stem cell does have some validity. But the construction, I'm bow-legged and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't do anything for that. All it does is regrow some cartilage in there. It's kind of like growing grass in a bare area of your yard. And so I had a couple of procedures of that. And then by the time I got to Medicare, I had my first scheduled knee replacement. And I was just waiting until I got on Medicare before I did it because they had unlimited therapy visits in Medicare. And I asked the doctor, I said, because they put this thing inside of you and it pivots around. I said, well, does that get in the way of the ACL or the LCL in there? And he says, you don't have any. I said, what do you mean? I had it, reconstruction back in the years ago. And he says, believe me, it is not there anymore. I said, well, what's holding my knee together? And he says, all the arthritis. So I looked at a X-ray of my knee. This guy doesn't even bother with the MRIs and stuff. He just looks at the X-ray. And even I could tell looking at the X-ray, and I know nothing about looking at X-rays, I could tell these things needed replacing.
Because I'm guessing because it's bone on bone.
It was bone on bone, and you just saw these little fissures and cracks and stuff. It was pretty ugly. And then I did one. 6 months later, I did the other one. And then a year after that, I climbed a 14er in Colorado. Yeah. And then I stupidly did it again 2 years later.
How'd you do it then?
I was the last one up and the last one down by about 2 hours. The last one on that I did, I wasn't intending to do it. I was just going to do the acclimation hike with the guys from our church. But I'd been staying out in Colorado, and I thought I would just do that. But then as I got to training, I thought, yeah, I'm kind of making some moves here. I'm using a Stairmaster, and it's getting easier and easier. And the one thing I didn't take into consideration was going down. Stairmasters help you going up, but they don't help you going down. And that's where I really died on the mountain, is trying to come off the mountain.
Yeah.
And it was, my legs turned to jello, and I had to sit every 50 feet on a rock or something to try to get the lactic acid out and be able to keep moving. And walking down the talus rock on the steep part at the beginning was really a killer. You're putting your weight in different angles and so forth. And then getting into the meadow below that, it was a little bit more level, but lightning was striking all around us. This was getting late in the day. Lightning comes in the afternoon. And we had to try to hustle to get into the trees. And then that's when the hail and the rain came. And then we were about halfway down at that point. And so I finally get down to the bottom of where everybody else is waiting to pile into the vans to go back. And they'd been sitting there for 2 hours waiting for me. So I gathered everybody up and I said, I am so sorry, my body gave out. And they're all like, no, this is part of the deal. And this one guy comes up, he wasn't part of our group. And he goes, thank you for being late. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I'm here because my son is on this journey to try to climb all 58 14ers in Colorado and break a record. And so I've been driving him around, and we haven't slept in 6 days. And he says, I came here and dropped him off, and he started climbing with his film crew and everything. And I'm just going berserk because he's in so much pain. And your guys here that were part of this trip from your church ministered to me for the last 2 hours. They prayed for me. They encouraged me, and they kept me going. And that means I can keep my son going. And I thought, okay, God, you got a plan for everything, don't you?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
So-
Even if we don't understand, even if we can't see it in the moment.
Yeah. Well, it just blew me away. He says, oh, thank you for being late.
What mountain was this?
Oh, this is one I took
Colorado?
back in. Yeah, it was in Colorado. I think it was called Huron or something like that. I don't know. I'd never heard of it
And
before.
how far is that? How many miles?
I don't remember. We probably did about 3,000 or 4,000 feet in elevation and probably did about a 7-mile round trip, I think, in distance. It's near Twin Lakes, Colorado, which is near Mount Elbert, which is the tallest mountain in Colorado.
And you said it was difficult, more going down than up.
Going down, yeah.
And this was on your reconstructed knee,
My reconstructed knees.
the artificial one?
The artificial ones, both of them. Both of them.
And this is what year was this?
This is a year ago.
Recently?
Yeah. When I was 69.
I thought you were talking about when you're
No.
20.
No. No, this is. I was a young pup. I was 69 at the time. Now I'm 70. I'm an old man now.
Oh, goodness. So you mentioned church. This is with your current church that you went with?
Yeah. They have a men's ministry, and this is one of the manhood things they do.
I actually that sounds awesome. I've never done that, but
Oh, you would love it, and you would do great. You're fit. You're young.
mentally though, and just I'm kind of high maintenance. I'm
You are?
I need my shower and my routine.
Well, they have a tree with an outlet, and you can plug in your hairdryer.
Okay. Well,
Not really.
hair dryer. I don't know if I need that.
But I thought of that because back when we were single in the career class, there was a girl that brought a hairdryer with her, and she found a tree where there was actually an outlet near the campground we were at, and she's blowing her hair dry in this camp out.
So let's talk about your journey to Christ.
Okay.
When did Christ find you?
That's a great way to put the question. That is a great way to put the question. It was around 1980. So I was around 23 years old, 24 years old. When backing up a couple years, I was a math major in college. I was going to be an actuary. And I like telling people that because it's such a stark contrast to what I'm doing today.
Yes.
No, but I saw math as being like playing with puzzles, okay? It's a very tangible thing. It's either right or it's wrong, and I love that. But there's also that creative side of my brain. I was taking lots of art classes in college as well. And a guy that was a roommate of mine in my fraternity worked for the Daily Nebraska newspaper, which was the campus paper. And he had suggested that I apply because he was looking at my drawings. And he says, you can't be any worse than the guy that we got now. And so I actually got the job. And then Josh McDowell came to campus, and Josh McDowell is a campus evangelist through Campus Crusade, okay? It's called a Crew now. Anyway, the editor of the paper was an atheist, and I did a comic strip making fun of Josh, some punchline like, oh, you must be joshing, or something. It was stupid. But anyway, so he says, this is great. I love making fun of these charlatans and, so forth. And Josh McDowell is not that at all, but it fit what he was looking for. And he says, let's run a comic strip every day. You can do this. I said, okay. And I tell you, I started that, and something came alive in me. Writing and drawing comic strips. And it wasn't just because of the popularity and the notoriety, it was why the popularity and notoriety was occurring. It was because I was scratching an itch inside of other people because I was expressing who I was within the comic strip and my relationship with the campus and the teachers and the students and so forth. And people were going, yeah, I experienced that. The kind of frustrations and joys and fun and all that kind of stuff. And so that lit a fuse in me. And math no longer lit a fuse in me. Taking advanced calculus, those people in that room looked like they'd enjoyed math a little too much, okay? And so I really enjoyed this, and I decided to see if I could make a living at it. And I tried to syndicate it multiple times over the years. Syndicating means you sell it to a newspaper syndicate that in turn will sell it around to thousands of newspapers, okay? And then they split the revenue from you. It's a very lucrative thing, but it's also very difficult to get into, and a lot of people want to do it. So you got 1,000 to 1 odds working against you. And the dean of the business college, I got a business degree just to finish college, and the dean of the business college was a fan of my cartoons, and he helped me get a job in the corporate world. And I thought, because I'm so popular on campus, my cartoon character won Homecoming King, and all these kind of great things. Everybody knew me by name on a big college campus, a D1 school. I thought that I could do anything. So I get to this corporate world, and I could do nothing. I mean, the skills of doing that did not translate over into that. And I washed out. I went to another corporation because they thought the first one hired me because I had talent, and I washed out there too. And so I knew one of the things that was standing in my way was this desire to be a cartoonist. I had to get that bug either in my system or out of my system. So I moved to Kansas City to camp on the doorstep of Universal Press Syndicate. They're the premier syndicate that markets most of the top features, like columnists and puzzles, all that kind of stuff. And they liked my work. I had showed them stuff before, but they said I wasn't ready. I needed to experience more of what life had to offer. And now I'm there. I had experienced the corporate world and a variety of things, and I was writing comic strips, and for 8 months, they would work with me, and they were teaching me the ins and outs of what makes a good cartoon. No pay, and it's all on me to try to sell them on the idea of buying my comic strip. Well, I knew I needed help above and beyond anything I could do in my own strength. When I was in the St. Louis was the city that I was in before, I had not gone to church. I got baptized when I was 11, and my parents quit going because of a church split. And I was looking into all kinds of crazy stuff when I was in St. Louis, cultic things. There's this thing called mind dynamics, where they practice extrasensory perception and all this kind of stuff. And I just knew that there was something wrong about this. There was something inside of me. And I made up my mind when I finished that course, I'm going to find out who Jesus Christ is. There's something inside of me that is drawing me in that direction. And this one guy from the Baha'i faith comes up to me and says, you should join us. We take the best from all religions. We'll take the best of Jesus Christ as well as Hinduism and Muhammad, and we just combine it all together. And I looked at that guy and I go, no, there's evil in your eyes. And so I left St. Louis, and that's when I came to Kansas City to camp on the doorstep of this syndicate. And I started going to church for the first time in my life. And I went to one church, and it was nothing but old people, and I was in my 20s, and they hung on to me until they found this young person, and they brought her over to me, and she pulls me aside and says, I'm only in this church because of my parents. If you really want to grow as a Christian, go to Colonial Presbyterian. And so I went to Colonial Presbyterian the next week, and I've never been anywhere else in 40 years.
That's incredible.
It is.
I didn't know that was the church that you started with.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I tell you, I did not meet a soul the first week I was there, but I looked around the foyer. I'd been in some churches that looked like you were going to a funeral, but I looked around the foyer after the church, and these people were laughing, hugging each other, greeting each other. Yeah. It looked like what heaven is going to look like, Mm-hmm. And so then I started meeting people one-on-one, and I began hearing the gospel message truly for the first time, not since when I was 11 and went through confirmation. I heard that that God loved me. He loved me so much. But I had a problem. I had a hard time worshiping there because I felt silly saying praise Jesus or something. It just wasn't part of my vernacular. I realized that what was standing in the way was I had a sin nature, and that was being pointed out to me, not directly, but through the messages I was hearing. And I was coming to grips with that I need to die to myself when here I'm trying to be ambitious, but yet I need to die to myself. How does that reconcile? And so I heard that God loved me, that he sent his son to die on the cross on my behalf and rise from the grave to give me eternal life. And I also heard that I needed to make a decision. And I thought, well, I'd already made that decision. And so I just kind of dismissed that. But then as I'm working on this comic strip, week after week, and going to church, going up there every night to explore a new Bible study, or I would walk into any. There was one group was teaching people how to prepare for retirement. I'm 23 years old, but I'm looking for something, so I'm sitting in that class too, And I was just really hungry. And then I come home to this dumpy apartment I was living in just north of the plaza, and there's this package outside my door. And I open it up. It's from the syndicate, and inside are all the comic strips that I've been drawing for them, plus a rejection letter. Mm-hmm. And that was crushing. Mm-hmm. And my money had gotten close to run out. I'd gone through all my unemployment. I'd gone through my savings, and I didn't know what to do. And I started looking for work, seeing if I could drive a UPS truck, drive one of those. You can only work 4 hours a day in that time, and you're running really hard like a full day, and then I could still maybe draw cartoons on the side. Thought that'd be good. Couldn't get in there. I would go down to some of the restaurants down in the plaza, see if I could work as a waiter. Well, where have you waited tables before? I said, well, I've never done that. I couldn't get a job there. I was looking for about 2 solid weeks, looking for some kind of work to do. And finally, out of frustration, I said the 4 words that changed my life. I said, God, I give up. I cried out to God, and I believe that was the point in my life where I really moved Jesus from here to here. I placed my total trust in Christ for my salvation, and I gave my life to him. I didn't care to be a cartoonist or anything. The next day, I looked across the street from my apartment. Now, this was a dumpy old apartment. I paid $120 a month for my room, and it included utilities. And if somebody upstairs turned on the water, or no, downstairs turned on the water, I didn't get any water upstairs, okay? It was really a bad place to live. It was dumpy. It's no longer standing anyway. And there was 3 dumpy-looking houses across the street from Southwest Trafficway, and they were connected. And they all had boards over the windows, and there were people standing around in front of it and moving from house to house. And I thought, what in the world's going on over there? And so I walked across the street, and I see it's a business. And I walk in there wondering what in the world they're doing. Did they make porno movies in here or something? And so I was looking for a job. I said, I'll do anything. I'll sweep floors. I'll empty the trash. I'll do anything you want. And they said, well, what have you been doing? The husband and wife team, the boss, they took me in the office. They said, what have you been doing? And so I told them a little about the corporate experience, but I told them I spent the last 8 months trying to syndicate a comic strip. I thought, gosh, what a stupid idiot. Why would I do that? Waste my life doing that? And they said, well, do you know what we do here? And I said, not a clue. And they said, well, we make slideshows. These are multi-projector carousels and slideshows where we can simulate animation and do these things, and we do presentations for different companies. Like TWA Airlines was one of their clients. And they sent me home to do a test drawing of a TWA jet skiing down a mountain. They said, we've been looking for a cartoonist for 3 months. And I said, oh. And they said, you've been trying to sell a comic strip. Are you a cartoonist? And I said, maybe. So they sent me home to do this drawing of a TWA jet skiing down a mountain. And I brought back the drawing. I got some photo reference, and I brought it back. And they looked at it, and they said, this matches the style of the guy that left 3 months ago. And they put me to work that day, the day after I placed my trust in Christ, as a cartoonist, the only cartoonist on staff, to help with these slideshows. And I thought, wow, God, that is just amazing. So I was a bull in a china shop in that place. God had met me, those good words that you use, God had met me, and it was my turn to get everybody in this place to meet him. And I got fired. These people were into all kinds of cultic things. They'd go to the husband and wife team would go to Iowa to some seance to talk to her dead mother or something. There was one cult called Eckankar that somebody was in, and then there was a couple of guys in the homosexual movement. It was a crazy place to work. But I worked there for 1.5 years before I got fired, okay? I've been fired from every job I've ever had, by the way, okay? Mm-hmm. And this is the way God moves us sometimes, And so after 1.5 years, I got the training I needed there, plus the training I got from the syndicate. They let me go, and that's when the door to Christian publishing flew open for me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I kind of made that a little bit of a long story, but that's how I got into doing cartoons, and I realized God had called me to create cartoons to be a communication vehicle for spreading God's truth.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the strip that you gave me, which is your testimony, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's a tract.
Yeah?
Those are called tracts,
Okay.
TRACT, tract. It's a
Okay.
little 8-panel comic strip booklet. So there was somebody that I was associated with ministry-wise said, if you're heading to Texas, you need to stop and see these people at American Tract Society. And I said, okay. And he says, they make tracts, and they spread the gospel this way. I said, okay. And I go there, I got an appointment, and I walked in, I showed them my cartoons, and they looked at it and said, well, this is really nice, but we don't do cartoon tracts. And I said, yeah, I know, that's why I'm here. And they said, okay. And for just, a pittance, they had me do a sample one. And it took off. I mean, they sampled that, and it was the first cartoon tract that I did. And it sold like hotcakes. I love that phrase. Sold like hotcakes. And then so they had me do 4 a year after that. And we built up an arsenal, quite a large arsenal, and then another tract company had me do a bunch of them. So I've got about 85 different cartoon tracts. And total, they probably sold about 75 million copies. I wish I had a penny a piece on those things. I did them for a flat fee, but then I use them everywhere. And the one I gave you, I pass out at restaurants because it tells I did that one just for me. Uh-huh. It tells my story that I just
so good.
told you.
I love it. I have a couple questions swirling in my head. First one is, you started out with an intellectual interest. I mean, anybody who has an interest in being a mathematician and then an actuary, you're an intellectual person, you're a numbers person, black and white.
Right.
You got to have the data, you got to have the evidence. So I think there's a real, I would say, misunderstanding in our culture. If you want to be a Christian, then you got to be a dummy. I mean, you can't be smart, you can't be intellectual. You can't be black and white. You cannot be evidence-based.
Well, I'm still a dummy.
But I mean, how do you reconcile that? You're a thinker.
Yeah.
And thinkers think that faith is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that?
I don't know. I've studied a lot of apologetics, and I've studied, there's 10 basic questions that most people ask. I've rarely found anybody to ask outside of that narrow window. And most people are satisfied with just a little snapshot answer for all of them. And apologetics has its place. A lot of people avoid apologetics. But for those who don't know what apologetics is, it's 1 Peter 3:15. But in your heart separate Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. And so I've worked with search ministries and developing some materials and so forth, and they focus on relational evangelism, and they help people sort through those intellectual answers. And when I learned those intellectual answers, I became more confident in sharing my faith. A lot of people denigrate apologetics because they feel like you can give somebody all the answers and they're still not going to believe. Yes, that is true. But I've learned that there's 3 main barriers for people believing. One of them is an emotional barrier. They had a bad Sunday school experience, or in my case, my parents had a bad experience in church and they quit going. So I was never really exposed to the gospel much after my confirmation. Another one is an intellectual barrier, and I know somebody specifically who had a hard time dealing with what you just asked, the intellectual questions. And he took his time and he sorted out everything to make sure that he wasn't making just a blind faith decision. And that's where apologetics comes in. Then the third barrier is a spiritual barrier. Through trust, you can overcome the emotional barrier. Through knowledge, you can overcome the intellectual barrier. But to overcome the spiritual barrier, that takes prayer. That's the only thing that can happen. And somebody must have been praying for me, because that was the one thing that held me up, was the spiritual barrier. I didn't want to give up my own life. I didn't want to die to self, because I knew once I made this decision, I was all in. I don't live by conventional means. This is why I explored other things, cultic things. I'm not defined by the reason that people give because we've always done it this way. I'm too much of an out-of-the-box thinker, a creative person, an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. You can relate to this. Mm-hmm. You don't think the way other people think, and that's by intention, and it's also the way you're built. This is why I was fired from every job. I kept asking why. Why are we doing it this way? And that spiritual barrier was overcome by the grace of God. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay? It wasn't me. There wasn't anybody that led me to the Lord. It was only God himself that led me to him, mm-hmm. if that makes sense.
Yes, fully. The other question I had was, when you were struggling and your passion was to be a cartoonist, but it wasn't there, and the doors weren't opening for you, you didn't just sit and wait for it to happen. You didn't say, well, that's all I'm going to do. So until that happens, I'm going to live in unemployment and just wait. No, you said, I would do anything to pay my bills. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be a UPS driver forever.
Yeah, right.
But I think today, especially in today's culture, it's the all or nothing approach with the people's quote unquote passions that they want to do, instead of grinding and sacrificing so then you can do your passion. Mm-hmm. It seems like that's what the approach you took.
Was there a question in there?
I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. No, but what I like is that because you're built the same way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're tapped into that. Yeah. And I think some people that may be listening to this broadcast are built this way too. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I want to encourage them. When I used to do a cartoon camp, I used to tell people that there are 3 people asked me how I continue as a cartoonist, how I make a living at this. And I said there's 3 key ingredients. One of them is, let's see if I can remember these. I quit doing cartoon camps about 4 years ago. That you have to have the talent, okay? And talent alone, without that passion, isn't going to get you anywhere. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing that Michael Jordan was cut from the basketball team his sophomore year of high school.
Yes.
Okay? You have to have a calling. I specifically had a calling, a nudge from God to do this specific thing, okay? And it took a while to flesh out. A lot of people can lay there in bed and think, I think God's calling me to be president of the United States, or something.
Right.
But over the course of my career, I got to do things I never would have imagined at the beginning of my calling. The calling is a general enough term that encompasses what it is that God sees in you to do for him. Now, this is going to be a bold statement. I'll get to number 3 in a second. This is going to be a bold statement, but when I started building my Cartoonworks website, it surprised me. I just found work after work after work. I've got a whole room over top of my garage where I have all the stuff that I've done for people, files and files and files, and I have stuff on my computer that I've done. And the statement is that God made me the most prolific Christian cartoonist in history. Okay? Throughout the 45 years I've been doing this, I've known other players in this, but they either did one single thing and did it really well, like Johnny Hart with BC and Wizard of Id, his comic strip, or there's a lot of people that maybe worked at a publishing company and then did some freelance stuff on the side, or they worked in some other industry and they did a few Christian illustrations, or somebody that maybe focused on one thing, editorial cartoons or something. I've done the full spectrum of stuff, everything from T-shirts to curriculum to books to devotionals to posters to cartoon tracks to custom comic strips, the whole gamut. I never have been able to zero in on just one thing and stay with that. And I've done it for multiple publishing companies. A lot of times a publishing company would use me for 3 or 4 years, and they'd get the material they wanted, then they'd recycle that. And then I'd have another publishing company that just come up out of the blue that would do the same thing. So I've done it for a variety of denominations as well. This is all becoming real to me now as I'm collecting all this stuff from my website. And it's clear that God had called me to create cartoons to be a communication vehicle for spreading his truths, and he made me the most prolific Christian cartoonist in history. And so the calling is very important. And it kind of evolves over time sometimes. The third thing is, you alluded to this is perhaps the most important thing, and that is perseverance. Because I know people that are far more talented than me that haven't been able to stick with something like this or be initiating with it. They're far more talented than I am. I'm not the most talented cartoonist out there, but it was something inside of me because of the calling and because of the talent that God continued to have me push. And that comes from him too. And I think of the perseverance that it talks about in James 1. You know, there's, I wrote in the margin, and this probably came from my mentor, that when it comes to perseverance, don't fight it, just hang in there. You know, you ride persecution. You keep doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't whine and complain about it. You just hang in there with it. And that's borne out in my life. I still have. I told you before we started this, sometimes I feel like I'm taking 3 steps backwards for every step I take forward.
Yeah.
You know, you can relate to that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Every single day.
Yeah.
I think every entrepreneur and really every human who's in pursuit of achieving something greater than themselves is going to feel that.
We wear so many hats.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, that is the truth. So how many years have you been a cartoonist?
Well, I've been all my life, I guess you could say. But
Professionally?
45. I started in 1980, September of 1980. So this would be my 45th year next year.
How many times did you want to stop?
0.
Really? Mm-hmm. You never felt burned out?
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing about burnout. This is something my mentor shared with me also, is that when Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, he said, the disciples came back and they said, "You need to eat something, Jesus." And I think it's in John 4:34 or something. And he said, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me." Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you're doing what God's will is, what he wants you to do, you get tired, you get exhausted, you get hungry, but you don't get burned out.
So, how did you get through those times?
Crying out to the Lord. My dog, Ginger, a golden retriever, she's passed away now, but Cindy was homeschooling at the same time, going through the same struggles in her calling to school the kids at home. And we would walk Ginger. Ginger would walk between the two of us. And I had a short leash, and it was slack. I wasn't having to rein her in. She likes walking between us. And if it was just me walking, I'd have to drag her. She wouldn't come. Or Cindy, it'd be the same thing. It had to be both of us. God's calling on Ginger, okay? And so every morning we would walk that dog in a little 2-mile route, and Cindy would say, "I can't do this anymore. I'm ruining the kids. This is awful." And somebody coached me early on that said, when your wife says that, don't say, "Well, maybe we should look into that Christian school with that down the street," or, the public schools is still an option to be cheap, Don't ever say that. What you say is, "It's okay, you're doing great. Mm-hmm. It's okay, you're doing great." Mm-hmm. And so when I was going through similar things, we don't have enough money to cover the expenses. We got to borrow against our house again. Sometimes we live off of our home equity line of credit until things turned around. And then we would, as the mortgage would go down, the home equity would go up, we would then put them together and get a new mortgage.
That's the American way.
That's the American way. So we did that multiple times. But, sometimes I would say, "God, you called me to do this. Why aren't you opening the doors for this to happen?"
Yeah.
And Cindy would just kind of step off to the side, And I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "When the lightning bolts hit, I don't want to be a target."
You got a smart wife. Yeah. You got a smart wife.
Well, I learned that, the essence of prayer is being honest with God, because he knows what's in your heart anyway,
Yes. Think of Job.
Yeah.
Sitting there with all the ailments. But, Job is the ultimate, one of the best examples of that.
Yeah.
God, why am I having to deal with all this suffering?
Right.
Why does it? I mean, it really just comes down to obedience.
Obedience and the word. It's amazing how God will open up something for you.
Yes.
I can give you an example just this morning, okay? I get this notification in my email that there's some animations that I have on YouTube that are being disputed by copyright, and they're going to be taken down in a week if I don't contact the publisher. Great way for this publisher to tell me they don't want me to use those animations anymore. Anyway, I am just grieving over this because not only the loss of the animations on YouTube, but just how they're handling it. You know, it just seems so unnecessarily forceful. You know, and there is some dispute as far as whether I've got permission and so forth, and we're working through that. But I happen to be reading, because I'm going to be teaching Philippians here pretty soon, reading in Acts 16 where Paul went to Philippi. Before Acts 16, at the end of 15, Paul has a sharp dispute with Barnabas over Mark. Yeah. Mark deserted him, and somehow Mark is a relative of Barnabas. He's more into nurturing Mark than in the mission, and Paul is only mission-oriented, and he knows they're going to be hit in persecution. We can't have them. So a sharp dispute. Neither one of them were wrong. So Timothy comes into the picture. And so the next step is that they're praying. They're going up. They want to go to Asia or Bithynia, but the Holy Spirit is blocking them from this direction and this direction. And so they keep moving forward, and Paul gets this message from this vision from God of a man beckoning him to come to Macedonia, which is where Philippi is. And so they drop everything and they head for Philippi. And that's where they meet up with Luke before they cross over into Macedonia, and Luke is chronicling all this. And then the story goes from bad to worse. I won't go into all those details, but the point is, up to this point, is that Paul could have whined and complained because what he thought was the right way to go was being blocked. I could whine and complain about these animations being taken down, but God has another purpose. He has another direction for me to go. These animations, 1.5 million people have viewed them and have written, a lot of them have written comments. There's 10,000 subscribers. This is over a 5-year period of time. And a lot of people have written comments saying things like, I never really understood this passage of Scripture until I watched this animation. Thank you for doing it. And these are individuals. These are not what the original publishing was meant for. Is meant for Sunday school teachers as part of a package of curriculum and that kind of thing. So I hope when these guys take this down, they still make the individual animations available online somehow. So I grieve over that the loss of the gospel being spread as a result of this action. But it's easy when push comes to shove to start changing your mission from serving the gospel and spreading the gospel to change it to sustaining the ministry. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's easy for me to think in terms of, I want to sustain my cartooning business or whatever it is, instead of thinking, well, if God doesn't want this to go, he can close the door and he'll open up something else. Mm-hmm. Like right now, navigators.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So today you are a navigator.
Navs, there we go.
So what are the navigators?
The navigators is a discipleship ministry, basically. I mean, the idea is to know Christ, make him known, and help others do the same. And I had a navigator disciple me. He was the one that kept pouring the Word of God into my life while I'm going through this journey as a cartoonist. And he would, we started out in a men's study and then a couples study, and then he was 25 years older than me and died in 2013. And he would come to for the last 15, 20 years, I suppose, he would come into my studio every Wednesday morning, and we'd spend 2 hours together where we would pray for the ministries of our church, pray for my family, his family, and our mutual ministries, and my work as a cartoonist. And he would do that consistently. And he was a walking concordance. And the guy would answer every question I had with a verse. That's why I loved him, is that he wasn't giving me an opinion as much as he was giving me what the Word had to say. And so when Christian publishing began declining around 2015, I knew I needed to add something else in my life. And And I was at a navigator event, which I never go to. He didn't disciple me to be a navigator. He discipled me to follow Christ. And so I was at this event, and his widow was there, and she knew that I was having trouble sustaining the freelance business. She says, "What are you planning on doing?" And I said, "Well, I was thinking of maybe being a pastor because I've had some experience doing that, but I'd have to take too much training. I was thinking of being a counselor, but then I'd have to, because people come to me with their problems, that I'd have to take too much training." Then I thought, well, how about if I became a life coach? And she goes, "What's that?" And I thought, well, that's probably a lousy idea. No offense to any life coaches out there who are doing a great job, but I just thought, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And then these words came out of my mouth. They were not my own. I assume I know where they came from, the Holy Spirit. But I looked at her. I looked around the room at all these navigators during the break time. I said, maybe I should look into getting on staff with the navigators. "That's a wonderful idea, Ron." And she just thought it was great. And I'm screaming inside of myself going, no, you're moving from the frying pan into the fire. You got to make enemies out of all your friends because you got to hit them up for money, and people are going to avoid you in the hallway. And, all these thoughts are screaming into my head.
Yeah.
And it's like, what did I just say? So I went to our retired missions pastor, and I threw this idea because I couldn't shake the idea. And I threw it to him, and he says, "Ron, I can't think of anybody that's better suited for a ministry than you are for the navigators." I thought, it's not what I wanted to hear. And then I went to our current missions director, and he has, in a sense, said the same thing. He says, "Wow, now that your mentor has passed away, we have a slot here that we could add another navigator into our support base. And I think it's a great idea." And so I called Dave Woodell because I had spoken at some of the Connect Business Lunch things and some of the other groups. And first time I called him, I was calling him about the idea of being a life coach. And he says, "I'll get back to you." And then when I thought, I'm going to look into being on staff with the navigators, I called him. Boom, he called back right away. "Let's get together." And so we went to lunch. And then he brought the whole staff over a week later, and they all talked to me, and they said, "We do not want you to give up cartooning. To be in the workplace mission, you need to have that footprint of credibility." And I thought, well, there's the answer then. I was afraid I was going to have to undo everything that I had been building, and I don't. I can still continue with this part-time and still be a navigator part-time. And so this is where God has planted me, and I never thought I would enjoy anything as much as drawing cartoons, but I love working on staff with the navigators. I'm a people person. You can tell.
Matt, from an actuary to a people person.
Yeah, that's right.
Those are all nerds. Transformation.
I can't believe I worked 45 years by myself in my little cubicle or my little closet of drawing cartoons.
Well, I mean, it seems that if you're doing that naturally, you're an introverted person.
I'm an extroverted introvert. How about that?
Right. And I think a lot of times people will think, "Oh, I'm introverted, so I don't like people, so I'm just going to be by myself." But that is not the design.
No.
We're supposed to be with people, socializing, connecting, serving each other. Yeah. That's where the joy lies.
It is.
Being by ourselves. I mean, COVID was the test of that. And the depression went up, anxiety increased, et cetera, but
and you got hit worse than others.
Yes, we did.
I could still draw cartoons during COVID.
We could not. I mean, we tried to teach our kids over Zoom, but that was a disaster.
I cannot imagine.
But we were blessed to be able to do it. But my point is, if you are an introverted person, you have to almost force yourself, pick your body up and go and be around people, even if you naturally don't want to.
Our pastor, Colonial is such a relational place. Jim West he announces from the pulpit, "I'm an introvert."
Yeah.
Which is amazing because he does so well connecting with people. Mm-hmm. But his love is to go out on a fishing boat and be by himself.
Yep.
And I think some people that think they're introverts, it's because they're around too many people.
Yep.
They may be extroverts, but they're just around too many people too often.
I always saw it as Where do you get your energy?
Exactly.
How do you recharge your battery?
Right.
If you're introverted, you got to go. Like for me, I'm probably more in the middle, maybe a little bit less extroverted, more introverted. So I know when it's time, I need to go in a room for 10 minutes and just recharge and not be around anyone.
Yeah.
But then you have extroverted people where I think they're the opposite, where they have to be around people in order to recharge. If they're by themselves, their battery is draining.
So what am I? Because I get here in this kind of a setting and I just light up, okay? But I'll most likely go home and take a nap when we're done.
Right. You're an introvert. Yeah, you got to go home and you got to recharge.
Yeah.
Even though you enjoy the interaction, the social interaction. So I'm the exact same way. And I think they call it the omnivore. So extroverted.
Wow, we eat both
Not
sides.
omnivore. I completely just screwed that one up. Introverted, extroverted, and then
Omniverted. How
yes,
about that?
there's an in between. I can't remember what it was called, but most people are that, where they're more in the middle and not complete extreme opposites.
Well, we have to have these labels. I don't think they're biblical, are they?
No. It's called read your Bible, pray, and serve others.
I know.
Who cares about the titles?
There's the Myers-Briggs, and then there's all that kind of stuff.
I used to be really into that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm in the middle of listening to a secular book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, I think. And it's really, I'm rethinking this whole personality test thing, because once you label somebody, now you're in this fixed mindset,
right?
Where that's who they are. They're always going to be like that. But maybe that's true. Maybe they can't change. But that's not productive.
Right.
The productive mindset or the productive path is to think that they can change.
Right.
To think we can change even though we're introverted. We can be more extroverted. We can be more social. We can improve our public speaking skills even if we're the shyest person ever.
Right.
That's the growth mindset, and not thinking, oh, I'm shy, I'm terrible at speaking, so then that's how I'm always going to be.
Right.
And I would even put a little twist on it and say that we can do anything that is aligned with God's will.
That sounds biblical.
Anything.
Philippians 4:13.
There you go. Anything. But don't lock yourself into, well, I'm supposed to be doing this. Or, okay, I just have to go back to what you were talking about with wanting to be a navigator. The first thing you did, or one of the first things you did, was you asked trusted people around you.
That's right.
I think that is the path to figuring out if you should do something.
That's exactly right.
Don't just make that decision on your own. Bounce it off of people, because if a trusted person goes, you're not the greatest at that, you could either not pursue it or know that you got a lot of work to do if you want to pursue that. So if somebody said, oh, you're just not good at drawing, well, okay, you got work to do. You got to start working at it. You got to start practicing. You got to improve that skill. All of the prolific experts, people don't realize most of them were terrible at what they do. It's crazy.
I look back on my early stuff and I cringe. And I go, oh, I can't believe people use me for this.
I think we all do that. But in the moment, we think that we need to have the natural talent. I mean, you mentioned that earlier, and I'm going to push back a little on that, is I don't think that's necessary. I think we need to have that growth mindset. And then, like you said, was that perseverance.
Yeah.
The grit to keep
Well,
going
let me
at it.
push back on your pushback.
Okay.
All right. Early on as a Christian, we had this Tuesday night fellowship, and we had as many as 100 people crammed in this one room in our house. I lived with a bunch of guys, and so I was trying different things. I tried teaching, I tried leading, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I tried leading worship, and I was playing on the guitar, okay? I had been practicing my guitar. I'm terrible at it. I cannot keep a pace. I cannot keep rhythm. There's just something inside of me that is marching to the beat of a different drummer, and that's figurative as well as literal. And I realized by trying things, you find out what you're good at and what you're not good at, what you have a propensity for and what you don't. And I also coached soccer for 40 years, not only as a player coach when I was playing, but also with my kids. And sometimes the parents would come up to me and say, well, I want my I want my daughter to play forward. You keep putting her back in the defense, and she needs to play forward. And I said, well, I can see the propensity that people have, and I think they do better generally if you find out their propensity, which could be talent, put them in that and let them flourish there. And yeah, we could try moving them around, but I can tell that this girl is not going to score goals, okay? But she is really good at stopping other people from scoring goals. And so you need to kind of steer yourself towards where you have propensity. Yes, try other things, but find out what you do best. And there's that old adage, it's easier to move a car that's moving, to steer a car that's moving than one that's standing still. Okay? So you have to move and try things, but then follow your propensity.
I would say instead of following what you're naturally good at, you follow what you want to do. What's your desire?
Okay.
Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
He was terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible as an artist in the beginning, and then he ended up becoming one of the most incredible.
Did you see his movie?
I did not, but she mentioned him in the book. It was an example of the fixed versus the growth mindset.
Ed Harris plays Jackson Pollock. He even kind of looks like Jackson Pollock, and he had a tragic life, but it kind of chronicles him and all his idiosyncrasies. It's really a good movie. I'd love to show it to our art group sometime. It's called Pollock.
Yeah, I love all this stuff because this is what we teach our kids here. It's all about the effort.
Yeah,
it's not about. And I think for me, I have to start changing the way I even speak to my daughter of praising how quickly it took or how easy it was for them. Wow, look how good you are at that.
Yeah.
You just got that. You got that done in 10 seconds.
So my daughter's an art teacher, and I've often asked how do you grade people? Because one kid is clearly more talented than another, but the other kid may be working harder than the first one.
Yeah.
Do you grade them by their effort or by what they're able to accomplish?
What does she do?
I don't know. I remember asking the question. I don't remember listening to the answer. I'll have to ask her again.
Well, we grade our students here on their effort.
On effort?
Yeah.
I think when she went through art school, art education, it was mostly learning how to throw clay on a wheel and and following instructions and that type of thing, or how to mix these paints and that type of thing. So for her education herself was not on how do you be creative with this stuff. It's more on how to use these tools. And my guess is that she probably grades kids on how faithful they are to that task of learning how to use different mediums.
Yeah, I mean, even for ourselves, we can get very disappointed when the result doesn't appear that we were seeking. And for me, the way I see this is, at the end of the day, if I gave my best and I didn't get what I wanted, what else could I have done?
Right.
So then why am I disappointed?
Right.
And then for a Christian, was I faithful? Was I obedient? Was I sinning? If yes to obedient and faithful, sleep well.
Yeah.
It's just those days that I feel that I did not put my best foot forward, or I was fearful to take the step that I know God wanted me to take, and then changing that mindset instead of just, because I'm very result focused, too result focused, and I think it's a selfish way of living life when I'm wanting what I want instead of what God wants for me.
You're part Asian, right?
Half Korean, yes, sir.
Half Korean?
Yep.
Because I've learned from my cartoon camp, and also being out in Hawaii, I taught some cartooning at the University of Nations. It's a youth with a mission school. Sometimes people with an Asian background, they tend to be more results-oriented, like you're talking about.
I wonder why. My father was 100% result focused.
So this one mom comes to my cartoon camp and she says, my son can't make it here for the first day, and I wondered if you could give me the syllabus and maybe write down some instructions of what he needs to know. And I thought, this isn't that type of deal. I mean, we're playing drawing games here. We're playing the scribble game where you do a scribble and pass it to your neighbor and they turn it into a cartoon. I mean, you like that, did you?
I'm laughing because We see that all the time.
Do you?
Oh my goodness. These parents get so hyper-focused.
Yeah.
Especially in this area.
Well, I was going to say, look where you're at.
Right.
Yeah.
The test score and the grades are everything.
Yeah.
But then they don't realize that the child is getting wrecked because all they keep...
The pressure.
Yes, it's the pressure about the result instead of how they got there and the effort and building up that resilience.
You know, a coach needs to know how to motivate because everybody gets motivated by different things. Some people need a kick in the butt, and other people need to be coddled a little bit. And I'm sure you've learned that, and I've learned that as a coach and as a cartoon teacher as well.
Why did you get into doing those summer camps for kids?
Actually, my daughter, who's the art teacher, she was pursuing that in school, and she wanted to try. She wanted to see what happened. She wanted to do her own art camp. So I would do a cartoon camp in the morning. She'd do an art camp in the afternoon. And I was kind of curious about the whole thing. The bigger question is, why did I quit? And why I quit was because I felt like I was a glorified babysitter. It's just some of the concepts, you know, I have a minimum age of 8, and I had an 80-year-old woman come, okay? I mean, it was the full gamut, but most of the kids are probably around the 9 through 12, 13 range, and we had an older and a younger camp. I found myself just looking at my watch, wondering when this thing's gonna be over. Because the kids were going through, some of the kids absolutely loved it. Well, the kids did love it. I mean, some of them came back I did the same stuff every year, and they came back 6 years in a row. Couldn't believe it. And I would get such affirmation from the parents. They said, oh, my son's just drawing all this dark stuff, and here you taught him how you can do something wonderful for the Lord with it. But inside of me, I'm seeing how the kids, it just wasn't resonating in the way that I was wanting it to resonate. And it was draining me of energy to do other things. And so I let it go, and coincidentally, that was a COVID year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have had to have let it go anyway that year.
What do you think was the cause of that change in the response of the kids?
Some of it was when we started, my kids were around the same age as the kids that were coming to the camp. So a lot of the people that came, we had a relational connection with. And then after a while, our kids grew out and went on their own. And the kids, the families that were coming into it, we didn't have that relational connection coming in.
Yeah.
I want it to be fun. And sometimes it's more fun when it's people you know.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, teaching kids, keeping them engaged, and helping them get to the next step. That's not easy. It's
As a
not
teacher,
an easy job.
As a teacher, I do much better with adults.
Yeah. I mean, we're all, yes, there's definitely truth to that where, I mean, even for us, we've had instructors who are better with a certain age group.
Yeah.
And I think that's just their gifting.
Right.
But there's definitely a skill set, or at least something you can learn with each age group on how you can teach them better.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah.
I don't mean to shift gears. This is your interview, but I was wondering if you wanted to talk about like Cartoonworks or anything like that.
Absolutely. Let's
Okay.
dive into that. Yeah. So Cartoonworks is your company.
Right. That's the company where I'm selling my material online. Ron Wheeler is my freelance business. Cartoonworks is stuff that I've already created.
Okay.
Okay. So I actually started Cartoonworks probably in the last century sometime, and I just have had difficulty getting momentum to be able to build the thing and then market the thing because I was doing so much freelance work. So now I'm at the point where I've got a new rebuild where things are easier to find, and I've got an image vault which has 30,000 clip art images in it, which I've harvested from all the freelance jobs. I have my cartoon tracks, which I mentioned, I've done about 80 of those that are available that people can download the file to print their own. They can download a file to use on their phone or their watch or whatever to spread to others. And we've actually done some of those tracks in Mandarin Chinese, working with a Chinese ministry that's discipling people over in China.
These are all faith-based.
Oh gosh, yeah, they all present the gospel using cartoons. And I come at them from a different angle, each one. And a lot of them are born out of conversations I've had with non-Christians. Or some apologetics, like, is Jesus the only way? That's the title of one of the tracks. Or is Christianity just a crutch for weak people? Yeah, we're all weak.
Right? The answer is yes.
So then I also have the what's called The Adventures of Jeremiah. It was a comic strip that I did for 20 years. It's a full-page comic strip I did on a weekly basis for a Sunday school take-home. And I've got 340 of those broken into different episodes with questions in the back, so people can download those for like $1.99. You get, the files for like 5 pages of this stuff with discussion questions that you can use with your junior high kids or high school kids. And then the rest of them that were in black and white, I call those Jeremiah Classics, and I put those in 15 different topically oriented books. And I got those all loaded in KDP, Amazon, and I'll have those for sale pretty soon on the website.
So where can people find
at cartoonworks.com.
And we'll add that link to our website and to the show, but unfortunately we are out of time.
I'm not surprised.
This has been a pleasure, and I was laughing half the time, so thank you for that. This has been
I am a cartoonist.
You are a living cartoonist.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, sir, for coming on.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.